I'm here with Guillermo Villanueva, CEO of Extrimian, Diego Fernandez, Secretary of Innovation of the City of Buenos Aires, and Dieguito, who you already seen it many times today. For this panel, what we are going to discuss a bit is about self-sovereign identity, which is a different use case of crypto, not related particularly to finance, and that's one of the interesting things we want to discuss a bit. And it's a type of implementation that the City of Buenos Aires is running in an innovation piece. So to get the conversation started, Diego, I would like to ask you how self-sovereign identity works as a piece of public infrastructure and technology, and how it connects to the blockchain networks.
Well, thank you very much, Pablo. When we started with this idea of implementing a self-sovereign identity model, we were convinced and we had the vision that in society, of course, we have financial transactions, but we have every transaction that we make on a social level. Each time that we go and we get a certificate from something, we get a credential that testifies that I am, for example, able of driving. Each time that we need to, for example, open a bank account or open an account in whichever financial provider, all of those processes involve a lot of friction. We need to carry either digital or physical papers or documentation from one place to another, and we're always thinking about what's missing, and eventually when we go and try to do something, we need to go and pick up another documentation for another organization. And what's the reason that this is happening? Because we work in digital silos. Each organization has their documentation digitalized, but we cannot communicate with one another. And that involves a lot of energy that society is sort of misspending in those type of interactions. And what we wanted to achieve was first to sort of streamline those transactions to give society the ability of owning their own documentation, of owning their own attestations that at the end of the day conform their identity. And we wanted to open the gates to two things that I think are pretty important. The first thing is financial inclusion. Today, almost 60% of the world doesn't have the ability of holding three things together. There's a bank account, a credit card, and a credit. Just a question. Which one of you has those three things combined? Credits, or has been the entitled of a credit card, and a bank account. Okay, we are privileged. 60% of the world doesn't have that opportunity. And in the City of Buenos Aires, we have almost 10% of our populations living in slums. Although of that population, nearly 75% don't have access to bank accounts, or they have bank accounts, but they don't know they have it. They just have a sort of a plastic card where they take money out, but they don't use it as a bank. And we think that self-sovereign identity is definitely a point in which that door may be unlocked. And last but not least, blockchain networks. The idea of Quark ID is anchored in several blockchains, and now we will do a double click on top of that. Today, Quark ID, which is the self-sovereign identity protocol that we developed with the collaboration of IOV Labs and Extrimian and several other partners in our ecosystem, is anchored to several different blockchains. It's Ethereum Layer 1, Bitcoin Layer 1, Polygon, Starknet, and RSK.
So today is the day where basically we announced that Rootstock will be one of the networks on the identity project of the City of Buenos Aires. So,
to be honest, that was going to be my second interaction, but you blew me off. But yeah, the Quark ID protocol is anchored in all of these blockchains, and we, as one of the users of Quark ID, have to decide in which blockchains will we be anchoring our digital identity solution. And we decided to go with two blockchains because we think we need redundancy. We cannot sort of sustain the possibility that one of the blockchains suffers a halt or whatever in a certain moment. And we decided to use two blockchains, as I mentioned, one of them being Starknet, which is a zero-knowledge proof blockchain that works as a layer 2 in Ethereum, and the other network, I'm really proud to say that, is RSK.
Thank you.
Excellent,
Thank you.
excellent, great news. Guillermo, and this type of implementations, how do you think it helps making the whole crypto and DeFi ecosystem and the digital space more secure?
I believe that we have to consider two different dimensions in terms of security. One is trust, and the other one is about cybersecurity. In terms of trust, think that the most fundamental piece of every interaction, social, commercial, or any other, is knowing the identity of our counterparty. And if we have lower levels of certainty about the counterparty that we have, probably we are less willing to do an interaction. This is the first aspect that we need to consider. No? It's having a more trusted environment expand our ability to do business, to do anything, any type of interactions. On the other hand, from the cybersecurity point of view, given the decentralized nature of the self-sovereign identity protocols, we have, by design, a protection about typical attacks like ransomware or even phishing. In ransomware, if we have a decentralized information and processing, it's almost impossible to do a ransomware attack, or at least is by far more costly. On the other hand, these kind of protocols enable that all the interaction, no matter what channel we are using, can be totally authenticated. This is going to lower significantly the ability to attackers to conduct attacks like phishing, no? Because it's not just to have a web page that looks exactly of the legit website, but we need to also go through an authentication process in every interaction. So the attacks like that we had, for example, in Costa Rica in March, the entire health system was attacked with a ransomware attack, and they have serious troubles dealing with that. If they were implemented this kind of technology, the attacks is not possible.
Okay, so we're talking about a system of identity that it's open, that's permissionless, that creates an identity in space that's multi-blockchain. It anchors an identity on different type of blockchains. And by scattering the information and decentralizing it, prevents different types of attacks. Dieguito, how this can help adoption, massive adoption of DeFi?
Yeah, I think the things that Diego was saying is, on one side is breaking up silos, no silos of information. I think that's a very important thing, because today, for example, every crypto wallet or exchange is doing KYC, from scratch. So that's such a waste of energy, for society, and actually that that waste of resources is paid by the user, it's paid by all of us. It's not that, this idea that the exchange is paying for it, of course it's paying for it, but then it's transferring that cost into us as users. So that's one thing. It's like it can streamline the process. The other thing, as Guille said, security. It's like I think in the future, having self-sovereign identity to access sites, to access to the different systems we interact with, will be a must. We'll no longer, centralized identification systems are a thing of the past because of what Guille was saying. It will be hacked very easily. But what I think is even more powerful of this, because that's sorting out the problems we have today, no? But I think these systems open new opportunities, because I think what the government does is so important because they are building the initial trust in that system, in that credential. And I think we always say, blockchain is a trust machine. It's like, and in a way, what the government is doing is like transferring the trust between the government and the individual to attestate that a person is who they say they are. But after that, anybody can use that credential to create credentials around that identity. And that's very powerful because then the private sector can use that system to issue the credentials they are issuing today. If you are a member of a football club, the membership will be a credential in the Quark ID standard. If you are going to the gym, as long as you pay your monthly fees, will issue a credential which you can use to access the system, no? And that is the beauty of it. It's like, and I think Buenos Aires and Gibraltar, that they are the first ones to adopt this, are taking, but in Buenos Aires it's a bigger leap of faith because it's such a big city. It's like they are, making a leap of faith on making a truly sovereign system. That's very important. It's like a standard-based, open source, where many wallets, there will be an ecosystem of wallets that will support the standard. The user will choose where to store the credentials. And that's truly revolutionary. I think, Buenos Aires with this will be is leading already, a new way of interacting with the citizens and creating an environment where the private and public sector can collaborate and work.
Let me add on top of what Diego just said, which I completely agree, that we need you. The idea of using an open, permissionless network is creating a value, an ecosystem of value. And that's where this community, the Rootstock community, comes into place, because you will be able of building solutions that use this digital identity, this self-sovereign ID protocol, in order to create applications, to create solutions that leverage that self-sovereign identity and use that self-sovereign identity within the ideas and the applications that you may come up with.
And talking about that and talking about reusable KYCs, what challenges do you see, Diego, about that the public administration has to face to accommodate to the adoption of Quark ID? And do you see them in any way similar to the challenges that is related to the DeFi adoption?
Well, I think that in the KYC issue, at least in Argentina, we have sort of a double approach, which is today using sort of standard technologies and maybe centralized databases. What we need to do is we need to change, that's not within the Buenos Aires city realm, it's a central bank responsibility. But today, with the standard technology that we use, we should be able of allowing a customer of any given bank or financial institution which has gone through the KYC process to sort of demonstrate that KYC process as they do, for example, in Brazil, in any other financial institution. Today we have a regulation that enforces every financial institution to start the KYC process from scratch. That introduces friction, that sort of drops out users, that makes no sense whatsoever. Of course, the self-sovereign ID protocol makes that interaction much more easier and gets rid of the centralized databases. So we need a change in regulation, that's for sure, and self-sovereign identity will make the process much more easier and straightforward using the self-sovereign identity protocol.
And Guille, once that starts to happen and private start private sector starts to join? What the benefits you see for the private sector?
Well, we were talking about the benefits of lower risk is one of them. Lower cost is also other the benefit. Better user experience because you don't have to go through the same process many times. And finally, one that Diego mentioned, we are enabling new business models. In the Web 2, one of the biggest problems for any startup is to create critical mass. We are breaking that paradigm because the critical mass will be there. So the startups, the only that has to willing to is to create value-add services to that critical mass, which is a totally different paradigm. We are not creating a business on top of using the information of the people, but creating value-added service to the people.
What's the government role here? Because, of course, if I was the CEO of a CeFi exchange and I should enforce my customers with KYC, each time that I see that customers go through the process and just drop off because of the cost of the process, of the personal cost of the process, I would be sort of, my incentive would be not to do it, because that would basically reduce my use base. The government, and I'm convinced of that, may take that cost. Why? Because usually people, and you of course know this, when people need something from the government, there's not a way of saying no. I mean, if I need my driver's license, I need to go through that process, whichever that process is. So we can, as a government, sort of pay the costs of that friction. And by we paying the cost of that friction, you as a private sector are sort of not forced to pay for that cost. Why? Because we will be onboarding the users, and we wouldn't be transferring that cost and that friction to you guys from the private sector.
That's actually great. And connecting in that, sometimes, Dieguito, we've discussed that self-sovereign identity is like the missing piece of the crypto image, right? You have the finance image, you have the identity that completes the whole thing. Connecting this, how do you think it will help to the mission of inclusion and social inclusion to reach the unbanked?
Well, I think Diego left, like, he gave the facts. No, it's like we have 60% of the population excluded in Latin America. I think half of the world is excluded from the traditional financial system. And I think it's not because the traditional financial system is mean. It's just that we don't have an efficient way to interact with that people. And I think in the thesis of IOV Labs, basically, reputation-based identities is the key to enable access to financial services for anybody, regardless if they were born poor, rich, middle class. Because any human being through life can create a reputation if they keep certain behavior. What we are enabling with this self-sovereign identity is a reliable way of building that reputation in a digital form. So when you present all your financial and social interactions, I know they are true because they are cryptographically signed, attached to your self-sovereign identity. So self-sovereign identity is the cornerstone for reputational identity, and reputational identity is the cornerstone for inclusion. Is what will enable any human being to be able to access to financial services, to be able to interact and trade with others that don't know this person, because trust will be built around this reputation. So I think it's so powerful. It happens, we have been discussing this a lot. More and more we realize how powerful this concept of self-sovereign identity can be for society. But yeah, we are in the first steps, early steps of this.
Very, very early. So to close, I have one last question to all, is how envision society operating with this model within the next couple of years? Guille?
Okay, I think we are in the right moment, and decentralized identity or self-sovereign identity are going to explode in the next few months. I've been working on identity for the last 10 years at least, but right now I am starting to see, for example, Vitalik Buterin with their Solvang tokens. In the other hand, you had Jack Dorsey with TBD and the Web5. All of those are identity-related projects. We have governments that are starting to implement this, and we have also big technologies like Microsoft, big technology companies like Microsoft that yesterday launched their initiative. So it's happening right now, and we need to work very hard in order to prevent that we do in the right way. No?
Well, I will make your recommendation. If you have any doubts regarding digital identity, this is the guy to look for. He knows his stuff. Huh? He really knows his stuff. But I'm going to share two visions, one in the very short term, the next, I don't know, maybe 24 months, and one in the next, I don't know, let's say 120 months. In the next 24 months, just a small example of a use case is when a cop stops you driving your car and says, hey, driver license and registration. Today you start to search for pieces of plastic in your car, in your wallet, whatever, and you start showing every piece of information, every claim in that credential to the policeman. In the future, with self-sovereign identity, the policeman will present you a question, but instead of speaking driver license and registration, he will show you a QR code. And that QR code will be a question to your digital identity wallet, and you will send a proof of that information without sending the information to the cop. And that will be much more, a much more streamlined communication between the verifier and the holder. And in the next 120 months, in the next 10 years, I think that society will start to have a big change in the way we govern ourselves. Why? Because we will be able of voting, of expressing our opinions on a lot of issues that today are very costly. Today, if we need to ask society, hey, what do you think about doing this or that action within our community? We need to do an election and call people out and put, I don't know, voting machines everywhere. In this future world, in the next years, we will be able of asking that question, and everybody will be able of answering in a completely secure way, just using their phones. And that will be a game changer.
Absolutely. I think 2 years will be the beginning, but what we will have is the first experience. I downloaded the reference implementation Quark ID, and logging into a website, scanning a QR code was awesome. It's like, you know, no more users and passwords. So imagine that you don't have to keep users and passwords anymore. You just have all the access in your phone under your control, scan a QR code, then something on the background does a handshake between the website and your phone, and that's it, you're in. So I imagine that we will have that first experiences of easy access to things, easy and secure access to things, no? Because that's the thing. It's like this sovereignty. We don't know that, but we are centralizing so much of our access control in some corporations. It's like we are using the Google Authenticator system to access sites. We are using the Facebook Authenticator to access sites. The moment Facebook decides to shut us down, that's it. You are not really in control of your access systems. And with this, we are reclaiming sovereignty on that.
Excellent. Picking up on what you last said, look for us at Labinkov, look for the Web3 t-shirt or the Quark ID t-shirt, so experience the alpha version to do the demo and experience verified credentials by your own. Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much.